Welcome back. The daily death toll from coronavirus in the U.S. has fallen to 598 as the tally crossed 104,000. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 372,000 with over 6.1 million infections. More on that now in this report.
The Americas are now the epicenter of COVID-19 as the number of cases in Latin America crossed 1 million. The death toll in the region has also crossed 50,000. In Chile, health officials say they are taking all necessary measures to curb the spread of the virus.
We know we are enduring the most difficult weeks. We have had an important increase in the number of people infected, and therefore, we have strengthened all the measures that we have been implementing of our plan COVID-19.
In Russia, residents of Moscow have been allowed to go out for a walk for the first time in more than 2 months, while the UK is also preparing to relax its lockdown despite concerns by the government's scientific advisory body.
We're transitioning from level 4 to level 3. The reason that we can take the steps we're taking now is based on the cumulative advice that we've had from SAGE, from the medical community, and we would have taken more steps if we could have done, but we're taking very cautious steps.
Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan is mulling reopening its border to visitors from countries with low cases, including Australia, Thailand, and New Zealand. However, a record 40 people died in Bangladesh overnight as the country lifted lockdown after more than 2 months.
Here in Pakistan, the death toll from COVID-19 has surpassed 1,500 as 60 people died in the past 24 hours. The health ministry said nearly 3,000 more infections were reported, with a total over 72,000. The ministry said more than 26,000 patients have recovered across the country. It said the province of Punjab recorded the highest number of cases yesterday with 497. The ministry said over 14,000 tests were conducted in the past 24 hours. Today, Prime Minister Imran Khan will preside over a crucial meeting of the National Coordination Committee to discuss the recent sudden rise in cases. The meeting will decide the future strategy, though the government has already said a lockdown option is not under active consideration. Pakistan has condemned India's decision to declare 2 of its staffers at the High Commission in New Delhi persona non grata on allegations of spying. Islamabad also summoned an Indian diplomat to lodge a strong protest over that move. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the 2 officials were lifted by Indian authorities on Sunday on false and unsubstantiated charges. It said they were later released on the High Commission's intervention. The FO said the Indian action was in clear violation of the Vienna Convention as well as norms of diplomatic conduct. New Delhi had accused the Pakistani officials of espionage and asked them to leave the country within 24 hours. Pakistan already downgraded its diplomatic relations with India last year after the illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir in August. Taliban spokesman Sohail Shaheen said the government has released 2,284 inmates under the Doha peace agreement so far. In a tweet, Shaheen said Kabul's claim of releasing 2,710 Taliban members is factually incorrect. He said the only actual and true figures should be published, as this could distort the peace process. Earlier, the Taliban said they had released 420 government prisoners. Both sides are required to release 6,000 prisoners under the pact. China has threatened to retaliate against what it calls U.S. attempts to harm Chinese interests. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Washington's measures over Hong Kong interfere with Beijing's internal matters. He said the move will damage relations between the U.S. and China, and Beijing will resolutely defend its security and development interests. Zhao said both countries stand to benefit from bilateral cooperation. Zhao also criticized recent curbs by Washington on Chinese students and companies. In the U.S., protesters have defied curfews to take to the streets against the killing of African-American George Floyd in police custody. Restrictions had been imposed in the capital, Washington, and 50 other major cities. 5,000 National Guard soldiers have been deployed in 15 states to crack down on demonstrators. Riot police have fired tear gas at protesters near the White House. A tanker truck drove into a throng of demonstrators on I-35 in Minneapolis, which had been closed to traffic. In New York, police used force to quell the rally there. President Donald Trump has branded the anti-fascism movement that called for the protests a terrorist organization. The mayor of Washington, D.C. has condemned his statement.
I also said, Mark, this morning that I think that the president has a role to play nationally in calming the unrest that we see in cities across America. And I think at the least, he has to not incite violence, and that's what we would expect.
Thousands of people have also held protests in London and Berlin in solidarity with demonstrators in the U.S. Saudi Arabia says it has intercepted and downed 2 armed drones launched by Houthi rebels. State media said the unmanned aerial vehicles were headed towards the southwestern city of Khamis Mushait. Houthis have accused the Saudi-led coalition of killing 4 civilians and wounding 22 others in Hodeidah. The Houthi military said the coalition conducted 22 air raids on the province in the past 24 hours. They've accused coalition forces of repeatedly violating the UN-brokered ceasefire in Hodeidah. Libya's UN-recognized government says 5 people have been killed in rocket attacks by Khalifa Haftar forces in Tripoli. The health ministry said 4 people were killed in Souq al-Thilat and 1 in Al-Gharbi Street in the city center. The ministry said 2 people were critically injured in the strikes. Haftar forces intensified attacks on civilian sites in May after losing major ground to the government in their offensive for Tripoli. Libya has been torn apart by a civil war between the GNA and the Libyan National Army since April last year. The Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj has called French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian to discuss the latest developments in his country. In a statement, the Libyan government said the 2 leaders stressed that attacks by Khalifa Haftar's Eastern Army on Tripoli must stop. The government said al-Sarraj and Le Drian spoke over the phone to discuss regional issues. This comes after 2 days after al-Sarraj spoke to the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. Those 2 leaders also urged for a halt to Haftar's offensive on Tripoli. Haftar's forces have been conducting raids against the internationally recognized government since April 2019. 35 people have been killed in 2 separate attacks on a cattle market and a humanitarian convoy in Burkina Faso. In a statement, the government said 25 people were killed and more wounded in the attack on a cattle market in the eastern village of Kompienga. Meanwhile, the government said 5 civilians and 5 military personnel were killed near the northern village of Fube. It said 20 others were wounded after armed groups targeted an aid convoy returning from Fube after delivering supplies. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. The country has been battling armed groups with links to Al-Qaeda and ISIS since 2017. 18 people have been killed by armed bandits in Nigeria's northwestern state of Katsina. Police said the robbers also stole thousands of livestock. Locals said 500 men riding motorcycles and carrying assault rifles charged into the Faskari local government area. They said the men headed towards other villages in the Batsari local government area, and thousands of residents fled homes. Police said security forces are combing the forest to arrest them. Criminal gangs carrying out robberies and kidnappings have killed hundreds in the last year in northwest Nigeria. Turkey says it has killed 2 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry said the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. It said the militants were killed near Turkey's southern border. The ministry said it will not stop the operations against militants in the region. Since 2016, Turkey has launched a trio of operations across its border into northern Syria. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. On to the UK now, where Foreign Minister Dominic Raab has defended his government's easing of the coronavirus lockdown. In an interview, Raab said enough progress has been made to prompt such a move. He said England is transitioning from level 4 to level 3 after enforced social distancing measures. The Foreign Minister said that the government was ready to introduce further measures if the number of cases rises. He said the government would implement targeted measures in areas that see an uptick in coronavirus cases.
The reason that we can take the steps we're taking now is based on the cumulative advice that we've had from SAGE, from the medical community, that, and we would have taken more steps if we could have done, but we're taking very cautious steps.
The U.S. has delivered more than 2 million doses of the unproven malaria drug hydroxychloroquine to Brazil to fight COVID-19. In a statement, the White House said HCQ will be used as a prophylactic to defend Brazil's healthcare professionals. It said the medicine would be also used as a therapeutic to treat Brazilians who become infected. The statement added that the U.S. would also send 1,000 ventilators to Brazil, the epicenter of the outbreak in South America. The White House announced a joint U.S.-Brazilian research effort, which will include randomized controlled clinical trials. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has asked doctors not to prescribe the drug widely or outside of several clinical trials that are underway. Last week, the WHO temporarily halted testing of HCQ for COVID-19 over growing safety concerns. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. India has reported a daily record number of 8,392 COVID-19 cases, while 230 people died in the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has risen to 5,411, with over 190,000 infections. The fifth phase of the nationwide lockdown came into force today, marking several relaxations to reopen the economy. Delhi has sealed its borders for a week, though, amid a worrying surge in COVID-19 cases there. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal said the borders were being shut to allow hospitals and medical institutions to get a handle on the rise in cases. The national capital has nearly 20,000 coronavirus cases so far, with 473 deaths linked to the virus. India is one of the most water-stressed countries in the world, with the crisis worsening every summer. Villagers in the central part of the country are left with no option but to walk miles in search of water. More on that now in this report.
India's water crisis is the worst in its densely populated centre. In the state of Madhya Pradesh, villagers are forced to walk miles in the scorching May sun for water. In many parts of the country, the mercury has crossed the 40 degrees mark.
I travel every day for 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles to fetch water.
The humanitarian disaster also affects women who are usually tasked with transporting the water. Those with the resources gather barrels of water and load them on carts.
One of the major effects of the scorching heat is the water crisis. People are walking 2 to 3 kilometers from their villages to fetch water. The scene of women walking with containers is their daily routine.
Water scarcity is an age-old problem in this country which successive governments have failed to address. As India's population grows and its urban centres are placed under more stress, the situation is likely to get worse.
At least 10 people have died after tropical storm Amanda made landfall in El Salvador. Interior Minister Mario Duran said the situation is grave nationwide, especially in the metropolitan area of San Salvador. Authorities said some 1,200 people were left homeless and around 900 homes damaged due to the heavy rain. Amanda is the first tropical storm of the eastern Pacific season, carrying maximum sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. The storm, though, has weakened to tropical depression status soon after landing and moved north, centering some 45 miles northeast of Guatemala City. Amanda's downpours threaten to cause further flooding in southern Guatemala, western Honduras, and southeastern Mexico. In Syria, the coronavirus lockdown is driving food insecurity to record levels in the war-torn country. More on that now in this report.
Spiraling food prices and the coronavirus pandemic are compounding the damage of a 9-year war in Syria. The World Food Programme says an estimated 9.3 million people in the country are now food insecure, up from some 7.9 million people 6 months ago. It said food prices have more than doubled in a year. A simple meal of beans and rice can cost some 500 Syrian pounds.
We can cook beans with rice, but I cannot afford it. I used to mix the cucumber with yogurt, but that depends on my financial situation.
A slowing influx of currency due to the financial crisis in neighboring Lebanon has made the situation even worse.
Since the beginning of this year, everything has become more and more expensive. We sell apricots for 1,500 Syrian pounds per kilo and cherries for 2,000 per kilo. In previous years, these kilos of cherries cost only 100.
Hoping to stop the prices of basic goods from soaring, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has named a new internal trade and consumer protection minister. However, tightening Western sanctions along the coronavirus lockdown have cast a shadow over the new minister's mission.
China has launched two satellites, into space with a span of 24 hours of sending 2 others. State media said one of the new satellites will help in construction projects of the Belt and Road Initiative. It said Beijing launched a high-resolution Earth observation satellite called the Gaofen 902. The launch also included a narrowband Internet of Things satellite called Hede-4. Hede-4 has entered the planned orbit from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. Gaofen 902 will be used in land surveying, urban planning, road network design, and agriculture and disaster relief. European stock markets are trading mixed as lockdown measures ease across the continent. Investors, however, are treading cautiously as violent protests continue throughout the U.S. Frankfurt's DAX has lost over 1.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 1% higher. London's FTSE 100 is trading about 1% higher as well. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index led the gains, closing over 3% higher. Seoul's Kospi and the Shanghai Composite gained ground. The Nikkei 225 gained nearly 1%. Meanwhile, the international benchmark Brent crude oil price has gained a fraction, shedding early losses. The EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has warned the UK there will be no post-Brexit trade agreement if London does not fulfill its obligations. Ahead of a fourth and last scheduled round of talks this week, Barnier said London is stepping back from its original commitments. Barnier said it is important for the EU and UK to reach a new trade deal, especially due to the economic fallout of COVID-19. He said if an agreement is not reached, then that will have even worse consequences. Barnier said London and Brussels cannot afford to break off their nearly 50-year partnership without future arrangements. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has repeatedly said he is unwilling to extend talks past the current deadline. Brussels, however, has reportedly offered Britain preferential trade terms if Johnson agrees to major standards and regulations followed by the bloc. Dubai's flag carrier Emirates Airlines says it is cutting some of its staff to sustain business operations amid the pandemic. The airline did not specify the number of redundancies it is making. In a statement, the airline's spokesperson said COVID-19 has impacted many industries around the world. She said despite sustaining workforce amid the pandemic, the airline is finally bidding farewell to some of its workers. The spokesperson said the company is doing everything possible to protect the workforce wherever it can. Company officials said trainee pilots and cabin crew had been affected. The state-owned airline has around 60,000 employees and is part of the Emirates Group. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. For the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at indus.news. Thanks for watching.